Okay, so this is the inner point of the quilt. So this is going to be the tightest curve that we have to sew. And the only seam that has to nest is the center of the 1Z pieces and the center point of this arc 2 unit. So I'm going to flip it and I'm going to kind of look at these two seams, and they're pressed in opposite ways, which will help us nest. And I'm going to kind of slide from the right to the left until I feel those black seams lock together. So kind of slide. Okay, I can kind of feel that it's locked in place. And then I'm going to pin both sides of that seam. So it should be a nice tight bond. So now I'm going to sew the curve, and I'm going to start from the center and sew out to the end. And then I'm going to flip it and sew from the center out to the other end. Okay, I have my arc 2 unit and my arc 1Z unit, and I'm going to sew them together. So I'm going to start at the center point. Now I use my seam ripper as a stiletto, which kind of helps me kind of push my seams down when I need to, because these seams are pressed toward the dark side. So if we're traveling this way, we need to make sure that it's laying the way we want it to lay. I usually put my needle down before I take that pin out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift up this arc and kind of keep fingers on this lower arc, because these arcs are going in different directions. So we're going to ease it through as we go. So I'm only sewing a couple of stitches, and I also kind of make my stitch length a little bit shorter than normal, just because it's a very tight curve. So if I need to, I'm going to stick my little stiletto or something under there, make sure the seam is laying flat. So after every couple of stitches, I'm readjusting this top part. And this is a vintage machine, and it doesn't have a needle down position. So if I need to take the hand wheel and put that needle down and then readjust, sometimes you might even have to lift your presser foot and kind of have a little bit more movement. Just go slow. For this curve, I'm literally doing 2 stitches at a time. And as I get to the end, see if I can zoom in a little bit here. As I get to the end, this edge might not completely match up with that edge because we put a little extra on there, but that's okay as long as we've met in the middle at that nested seam. Now this very last part is tricky. I'm kind of maneuvering this upper part to make sure it is lined up on this edge. Okay, and so I've done this side. Now I'm going to flip it and start at the pin and sew the other side. Now I feel like it's kind of pulling right here, so I'm going to lift my presser foot with my needle down and kind of maneuver it over a little bit. You'll notice that doing the side with a small arc, you might like that side better. It's just a different feeling than the other side. So this small piece kind of has to be lifted up and maneuvered over. And I don't have a knee lift bar on this machine either, but you can still make beautiful things with old machines that don't have computers. They don't have anything fancy. Do it just like my mom and my grandma did it. Now, right now I can kind of feel that there's a seam, so I'm checking to make sure that that seam is laying down. And I'm going to keep readjusting here. Keep pulling this top part and kind of maneuvering it over. And for curves, you just have to go really slow, and if I don't like how it looks, I take out the seam and I do it again. But if you go slow, hopefully you won't have to. Now, right at the very end here, I'm not going to rush. I'm going to push that lower piece down to my left and maneuver that top piece over to the right because I want them to be aligned. Okay, and let me zoom out. So we've got our piece nested in the middle. And like I said, this side came off a little bit, but that's no big deal. The only point that had to match was that inner point. And it looks pretty good to me. Okay, so I'm going to press this and go on to the next curve. But this one is the toughest because it's the tightest and the smallest. The bigger the curve gets, the easier it becomes to sew. But 2 stitches at a time, small stitch length. Use your stiletto or your seam ripper and just go slow and make sure that your seam allowance is right on the money, as close as you can get it.